Zheng Qinwen, Leyla Fernandez, Elena Svitolina, Naomi Osaka, Jessica Pegula, Alicia Parks, Caty McNally. 7 players, 7 matches, 14 days. And Alex Eala did not lose a single one of them. That is the longest winning streak of her entire career. And here is how it looked from the inside on Friday night in Toronto. A 21-year-old sitting in a chair on center court, face drained, a trainer wrapping tape around her ankle, in the 4th match she had played in 5 days. That is what 7 straight wins actually looks like when the camera stops finding the good angle. Now rewind 7 months. January of this year. First round of the Australian Open. Alex Eala loses in 3 sets and goes home before the tournament has really started. At the beginning of 2025 she was ranked 138th in the world. Today she is 20th, the highest any player from the Philippines has ever reached in the history of the sport. So here is the question I want you to sit with for the next 20 minutes. How does a player go from losing in the first round of a Grand Slam in January, to beating half the top 20 in a 2-week span in August, while her body is quietly falling apart underneath her? Because I want to be precise about what that list at the top actually contains. An Olympic gold medalist. A multiple Grand Slam champion. A former US Open finalist ranked 3rd in the world. A number 2 seed. That is not a hot week against a soft draw. That is the deep end of the sport, 7 times in a row, with no days off in between. I went through all 7 matches. Every scoreline, every deciding set, every one of the 5 days that led to that ankle getting taped. And there is something in there that no ranking, no seeding, and no highlight package will ever show you. It explains the streak better than talent does, and it explains exactly why the 7th win nearly cost her everything. I will get to it. But it only makes sense in order, and the order starts a long way from Toronto. To understand how absurd that list of 7 names really is, you have to go back to where she was standing in January of this year. 7 months ago, Alex Eala lost in the first round of the Australian Open, 3 sets, to an American named Alicia Parks. Remember that name, because she comes back into this story later in a way you will not expect. Before that, she had reached the semi-finals in Auckland and lost. After it, she went home to Manila, played the WTA 125 event in the Philippines on a wildcard, in front of her own people, with the whole country watching, and lost in the quarterfinals. In January, Alex Eala was a player people described as promising. That word is heavier than it sounds. Promising is what people call you when they are still deciding whether to believe you. It is a compliment with a deadline attached. And she had that deadline hanging over her for a very specific reason. Go back to March of 2025. In Miami, Alex Eala, ranked 141st in the world at the time, walked into one of the biggest tournaments outside the Grand Slams and beat Jelena Ostapenko. Then she beat Madison Keys, who had just won the Australian Open. Then she beat Iga Swiatek, a 5-time major champion. 3 Grand Slam winners in one tournament, at 19 years old, before she had ever won a title of any kind. She made the semi-finals and lost. And the entire tennis world called it a miracle. Here is the problem with being called a miracle. Nobody expects a miracle to happen twice. The word sounds like praise and functions like a limit. For the next 12 months, every time she lost, somebody somewhere said the quiet part out loud. Maybe Miami was the ceiling. Maybe that was the whole story. So understand what she was actually carrying into this summer. She was not a player trying to prove she had talent. Everybody already knew that. She was a player trying to prove the talent was not an accident. And she was doing it from a starting point that had no map. She was born in Quezon City in 2005. Her mother was a national-level swimmer who won a medal at the Southeast Asian Games. At 13 years old, she left the Philippines and moved to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the academy run by Rafael Nadal. 13. New country, new language, no family in the building. Chasing a sport in which her nation had never produced a single top 100 player, man or woman, in the entire history of professional tennis. There was nobody ahead of her to call. No former Filipino pro to ask what the second year on tour feels like, because that person did not exist. She was not following a path, she was cutting one, alone, as a teenager. And I think that is the part that makes this next section land differently, so let me say something before we get there. If this story is landing for you, the most useful thing you can do right now is hit the like button, Because that is the only signal that tells YouTube to put a Filipino tennis player in front of people who have never heard of her. That is it. That is the whole ask. What happens next in this video is the part I most want people to actually see. Because 7 months after that first round exit in Melbourne, in Washington, something started that nobody, including her, seems to have planned for. Here is the part of a winning streak that nobody puts in the highlight reel. Every match you win is another match you have to play. Lose early and you get a week off, a flight home, a bed, a physio, a normal human schedule. Win 7 in a row, and the reward is that you never leave, never unpack, and never get a full day off. The prize for surviving is that you have to do it again tomorrow. By Friday night in Toronto, the streak had stopped being an achievement. It had turned into the thing that was breaking her. Look at the actual calendar. Monday. The final in Washington, already pushed to a second day by rain, which means she did not just play a final, she played a final twice in her head. Tuesday, travel to another country. Wednesday, a 3-set match against Alicia Parks in Toronto. Thursday night, back on court for doubles alongside Venus Williams, and they lost. Friday, less than 24 hours later, out on center court against Caty McNally, 5 days. 4 singles and doubles nights. 2 countries. 0 rest days. That is the situation her body was in before a single ball was struck against McNally. Now, the first set went fine. Better than fine. She lost the opening 3 games worth of momentum, took control anyway, and won it 6-3. And then, in the second set, at 2-1, she chased down a ball she had no business reaching, planted her foot to change direction, and her ankle rolled underneath her. Watch what she does next, because this is the whole person in one decision. She does not stop. She does not put her hand up. She does not look at her box. She finishes the game, wins it, and then sits down and asks for the trainer. The trainer tapes the ankle. And tape does exactly what tape is designed to do. It protects the joint by taking away the movement. For most players, that is a fair trade. For Eala, it is close to a death sentence, because her entire game is built on arriving at balls she should not reach. Take half a step away from that player and you have taken the sport away from her. Caty McNally read it in about 4 points. She started hitting behind her, making her change direction, forcing the exact movement the tape was preventing. She won 2 games in a row, turned a deficit into a lead, and took the second set 7-5. So here is the question that was hanging over that stadium, whether the crowd knew it or not. What is a 6-match winning streak worth? If the 7th match costs you your season. Because that is the actual math sitting in front of her at that moment. The US Open is 3 weeks away. It is the biggest stage in the sport, the tournament where she has already proven she belongs, the one that could define her entire year. An ankle injury in early August is a completely reasonable reason to shut it down. Nobody would have criticized her. Not one commentator, not one fan, not one person in her team. Retire, protect the ankle, live to fight in New York. That is the professional decision. That is what a smart career manager tells you to do. The other option is to walk back out for a 3rd set, on a taped ankle, on the 4th match in 5 days, against an opponent who has just figured out exactly how to hurt you, and risk turning a small injury into a big one in front of 10,000 people. Both choices cost her something. One costs her the streak. One might cost her the season. And she was standing there at 1 set all having to decide which, with about 90 seconds on the clock. But she was only in that position at all because of what had happened 6 days earlier in Washington. And that is the match that actually changed everything. Washington. The final of the Mubadala DC Open. Rain pushed it to a second day, which almost always favors the veteran, because the veteran has done this before, and the first-time finalist has to sleep on it. And the veteran across the net was Jessica Pegula, the number 3 player in the world, a former US Open finalist, a woman who has spent a decade learning how to close matches like this. Pegula took the first set 6-4. And at that exact moment, the story was already written. Talented young Filipina reaches her first tour final, plays beautifully, loses to the number 3 player in the world, everybody claps, everybody says what a bright future she has. It is a lovely story. It is also the safe one. Everybody in that stadium had seen this movie before and knew how it ends. Then Eala won 9 games in a row. Not a tiebreak, not a lucky net cord at the right moment. 9 consecutive games against the 3rd best player on the planet, in a final, on the second day of a rain-delayed match. 6-4 in the second set. 6-love in the third. Jessica Pegula did not win another game in the tournament. Sit with that scoreline for a second, because I think it gets read too quickly. 6-love in the deciding set of a final. That is not a comeback. That is a lockout. A 21-year-old took the deciding of the biggest match of her life off a top 3 player, without conceding a single game. And this is why I think this match, and not the injury match in Toronto, is the actual turning point of the entire year. Because before Washington, Eala was a player who beat great players. That was her reputation. Miami proved it. She could shock anybody on a given day. But shocking somebody and closing out a title are two completely different jobs. One is about how high you can reach for 2 hours. The other is about what you do when you are ahead and everybody in the building is watching you try to finish. Plenty of players can do the first thing. The second one is the difference between a highlight and a career. After Washington, she was a player who finishes. And the history landed all at once. First Filipina in the history of the sport to win a WTA singles title. First Southeast Asian player ever to win a WTA 500 event. And the ranking that came with it, world number 20, the highest any player from her country has ever held. Now, this is the moment in the video where I actually want to hear from you, because I have gone back and forth on it myself, and I do not think there is a clean answer. Which one is the bigger achievement? The 9 games in a row against Pegula, in a final, with a title on the line. Or the third set in Toronto, 6 days later, on a taped ankle, in the 4th match in 5 days, with nothing but a 4th round spot on the line. One is the better tennis. One might be the better proof. Tell me which one you would pick and why, because I am reading these and the best answers are going into the next video. And here is the cruel symmetry of all of it. That title in Washington is precisely the thing that put her on a plane the next morning instead of a beach. Winning the biggest match of her life is what booked her into the schedule that rolled her ankle 6 days later. The reward was the punishment. Which brings us to the 7, and the 7 are not what people think they are. Let me run them at you properly, because the list is the argument. Zheng Qinwen, Olympic singles gold medalist, first round in Washington. Leylah Fernandez, a US Open finalist, second round. Elina Svitolina, the number 2 seed, in the quarterfinals. 6-3, 6-4. Straight sets against a former world number 3. Naomi Osaka, 4-time Grand Slam champion, in the semifinals. Jessica Pegula, world number 3, in the final. 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. Alicia Parks in Toronto. 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. Caty McNally in Toronto. 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. Now look at the shape of it instead of the names. 4 of those 7 matches went to a deciding set. She won all 4. She did not win this streak by starting well. She won it by being the better player in the third set, over and over, in the exact part of a match where fatigue is supposed to settle everything. She went 7-0 across the entire North American hard-court swing. She has now won 10 of her last 11 matches going back to Wimbledon. And she went from 138th in the world at the start of 2025 to 20th today. But here is the thing I actually want to leave you with, and it is the part that changed how I read this whole run. What makes this streak unusual is not the length. 7 in a row happens on tour. It happens more often than you think. What makes it unusual is the density. Most 7-match winning streaks are built the same way. A player has a good week at a smaller event, gets a friendly draw, beats 3 players ranked outside the top 50, then carries momentum into the early rounds of the next tournament. The number looks impressive on a graphic. The opposition does not. This one is inverted. All 7 of these wins came inside 2 consecutive elite events, a WTA 500 and then a WTA 1000, with no soft landing anywhere in the middle. Inside those 7 matches there is an Olympic champion, a 4-time Grand Slam winner, a US Open finalist, the world number 3, and a number 2 seed. There is no filler in this list. There is no round 1 against a qualifier ranked 180. 7 wins are not all worth the same. These are the expensive kind. And that is exactly why the ankle in Toronto matters so much. She was not worn down because she played a lot of matches. She was worn down because she played a lot of hard matches, back to back, against the best players in the world, with a rain delay and a flight and a doubles night stuffed into the gaps. She was not running out of talent on Friday, she was running out of body. Which brings us to the only thing standing between Eala and an eighth. And it is not an American this time. Match number 8 is Belinda Bencic, Olympic gold medalist in Tokyo. Former world number 4. Currently ranked 14th, seeded 12th in Toronto. A Grand Slam semifinalist at both the US Open and Wimbledon. And a player Eala has never faced at tour level in her life, not once, in either career. And here is the detail that makes this almost cruel. Bencic arrived at this match having just come through 3 hours and 24 minutes against Taylor Townsend, a first set tiebreak lost, a second set tiebreak won, a third set that went the distance. Her match finished minutes before the McNally match finished. 2 players. 2 wars. Neither one of them has anything left. Whoever wins this is going to win it on something other than tennis. But step back from the bracket for a second, because the number 7 does not really belong to one athlete. Before Eala, the Philippines had never produced a top 100 tennis player. Not one, ever, in the entire history of the sport. There was no domestic coaching pipeline that had taken anybody this far, because nobody had ever been this far. There was no precedent, no template, no example. Every single one of those 7 wins is the first time a Filipino has ever done that specific thing. And you can see what that means in the stands. Toronto sold out at 10,000 seats. Flags across every section. Chanting between points. A chair umpire repeatedly asking a crowd to settle down, because an entire community had just found out it has a sport now, and nobody told them the volume rules. So the open question is not whether Eala is good. We are past that. The question is whether that ankle holds. And if it holds, what happens in 3 weeks in New York? When she walks into the US Open, ranked 20th in the world, on the longest winning streak of her career, in a city with one of the largest Filipino communities in the United States, in the biggest tennis stadium ever built. 7 straight wins on a body with nothing left to give. The number I care about is 8. And then, 23 days from now, the answer to the only question this video could not answer. We will be here the night we find out. Subscribing is not a favor to me. It is just how you get told when the answer arrives.